Adults learn in much different ways than children do. The motivations and needs are quite different. As a result, we must understand scientific assumptions of adult learners and what motivates them, both through curriculum approach and instructional strategy. As a result of immigration and the industrial age that irrevocably changed America at the turn of the 21st century, Dewey promoted experiential and reflective thinking, otherwise known as progressive education. As a philosopher, he led the progressive educational philosophy as the response to social needs and how the community's learning and experience will make society stronger and more resistant to the grasp of tyranny. This philosophy strongly focuses on the assumption that learning is approached upon the learner's imminent needs and that the learning is best facilitated to enhance what the learner has already experienced. There were many more sociologists, psychologists, and philosophers through the mid-1900s that moved adult learning to a separate field of study. This further lays the groundwork for modern adult learning theories and the development of andragogical models of learning, which seems to be the obvious turning point to modern adult learning theory. However, the modern era of adult learning was truly introduced by contributors such as Houle in the 1960s, who helped devise concrete principles of adult learning theory specifically in self-directed learning, and Alan Tuff in the 1970s, who brought a fresh perspective of self-directed learning and those implications for the adult learners. Andragogy is the most well-known and utilized adult learning theory. However, we will also look at three other essential adult learning theories that include self-directed learning, experiential learning, and transformational learning. Each theory applies to the online environment differently, and as such, benefits the adult learner in different ways. A crucial aspect to the adult learner is his or her motivation as it pertains to continued education. Each theory addresses learner motivation with unique assumptions. As a result, the design of the learner environment must be tailored to address these motivational assumptions effectively. Cyril Houle was essentially the founder of self-directed learning. He determined that while a group of people, quote, all had goals which they wished to achieve, they all found the process of learning enjoyable or significant, and they all felt that learning was worthwhile for its own sake, end quote. He further observed that there are three subgroups of adult learners that include goal, activity, and learning-oriented groups. Each of these groups looks at the concept of continuing education with very different perspectives and motivations. Goal-oriented learners take charge of their personal education by understanding gaps and needs that need completed in order to accomplish personal goals. These learners are prime examples of what motivates self-directed learning. Motivations such as career, family issues, or community social problems often drive these goal-oriented learners to continue education to enhance career opportunities, determine resolutions to those family issues, and provide perspective for community and social improvement. Activity-oriented learners are less common and have diverse reasons for continuing their own education. Houle lists reasons such as loneliness, seeking mates, or seeking escape from mates as some of the common factors. Some rarer reasons to continue education for this group are for the sake of tradition or to enroll in formal education for motivations other than just the need to learn. Finally, we have learning-oriented learners who consider continuing education as normal to their schedule as eating and sleeping would be to anybody's normal schedule. While andragogy was coined as a theory separate from pedagogy before Knowles in 1980, it was Knowles who defined the four assumptions that distinguished the two models of andragogy and pedagogy, as well as implications for the practice of andragogy. The original four comparative assumptions differentiating pedagogy and andragogy, developed and published by Knowles, are as follows. Adult learners have an intrinsic need to be self-directed, limiting dependency to specific situations. Adult learners learn more effectively when connecting learning with the resources of their own experiences, such as discussions, case studies, simulations, and field experience. Adult learners experience the need for learning based on experiences that identify the gaps in their knowledge and ability to handle social roles. And finally, adult learners have the need to experience learning as a competency that is immediately applicable. As a result of these assumptions, Knowles notes that, quote, their orientation towards learning shifts from one of subject-centeredness to one of performance-centeredness, end quote. There are essential characteristics of experiential learning to note based on the observations of the Lewinian model of action research, Dewey's model of learning, and Piaget's model of cognitive development. All of these models have similar characteristics that result in these conclusions presented by Kolb in his publication in 1984. Learning is a process, not a goal. Learning is continuous based on experience. The learning process requires resolution of conflicts. Learning is a holistic process. Learning involves transactions between the person and environment. And learning is the process of creating knowledge. Kolb had the conclusion that, quote, learning is the process whereby knowledge is created through the transformation of experience, end quote. Kolb further points out that this succinct definition includes the process of adaptation and learning as opposed to content or outcomes. Knowledge is a transformational process, being continuously created and recreated, not an independent entity to be acquired or transmitted. Learning transforms experience in both its objectives and subjective forms. We must understand the nature of knowledge to understand learning. Mezirow developed the transformative learning theory as an extension of the experiential learning theory. The book titled Fostering Critical Reflection in Adulthood focuses on critical reflection and how to interpret the experience of the critical reflection. There are two domains of learning, which are instrumental and communicative, and hold transformative learning within each domain. Task-oriented problem solving represents instrumental learning, with reflection mostly occurring after the task. Meanwhile, communicative learning is more subconscious and self-oriented, quote, focusing on achieving coherence rather than on exercising more effective control over the cause and effect relationship to improve performance, end quote. Mezirow makes the point that, quote, thoughtful action is reflexive, but not the same as acting reflectively to critically examine the justification for one's beliefs, end quote. Creswell discusses the social constructivist worldview, which is the assumption that every person actively, quote, seeks understanding of the world in which they live and work, end quote. While this worldview is mostly focused towards researchers and the methodology in which they choose to perform their research, this worldview directly impacts the strategies that both instructional designers and online facilitators and writers need to understand to ensure adult students remain motivated throughout their learning process. Crotty helps us better understand constructivism through the following assumptions as cited by Creswell. Meanings are constructed by human beings as they engage with the world they are interpreting. Humans engage with their world and make sense of it based on their historical and social perspectives. The basic generation of meaning is always social, arising in and out of interaction within a human community. This social constructivist worldview that is based on the constructivist theory helps provide context for us in understanding the value of an active learning process, thereby providing the essential motivation needed for adult learners. Emotion is always difficult to quantify, yet must always be included in the context of studies involving motivation. As adult learners have completely different life scopes and challenges than the target audience of pedagogy, we continue to focus on andragogy as our source of knowledge for adult learning behaviors and the subsequent emotional needs based on motivations. Teaching in the past has repeatedly sought to disengage from emotions. However, the adult learning process is seeing more power from the role of emotions being integrated with the learning. There is a strong division in how emotions do play as the role within the learning process, where some say that emotions are merely a physiological response to the environment, while others say that emotions are social and change based on individual context. However, it is important to consider that both experiential and transformative learning theories focus on the holistic approach for the adult learning that includes emotion, cognition, and experience. Completing online learning requires personal self-direction and discipline, and as a result of being more autonomous than on-site learners, takes much more responsibility in the learning process. However, the online facilitator needs to recognize which learners need more assistance with self-regulation ability, which includes the balance of cognition, motivation, and behavior. Also, the student's perspective of self-efficacy and task value are important to them, resulting in the implication that online curriculum designers and writers need to provide goal-setting tools and provide relevance to the student's experiences with those activities. Another important finding that resonates strongly with Mesereau's transformational learning theory is the need to use critical thinking in discussions. However, this is not necessarily a natural process for online learners, leaving the responsibility with the facilitator and writer to appropriately set the climate, reinforce contributions, and add information to push students deeper into conversation. Discussions are a very large component of the learning in adult education. Mishandling this during the curriculum design and writing, as well as the facilitation guidance, will lose a vast measure of collaboration and experiential learning. There are many proven instructional strategies for the online learner available to the writer and facilitator, supported by a trained curriculum designer that can assist with these insights. It is important, however, to recognize the underpinnings of adult learning and the motivational assumptions that drive those instructional strategies. This presentation is an introduction to these theories and motivations, but merely a beginning. Check out the resources that support the development of this presentation and contact your instructional designer for more support.